Hello, hello. This is David Lee Khim, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. Today, we're talking to Sabel Harris. Sabel and I met through co-marketing efforts during her time at Contactually and my time at Hubspot. Since then, she has moved into various roles as director of marketing at tech startups and has built communities, teams, and companies. She currently serves as a director of demand generation at EVERFI and recently added another full-time job serving as advisory neighborhood commissioner for District 1B12 in Washington, D.C., a hyper-local politics role serving the community. This conversation covers a wide range of topics, including therapy, what it's been like balancing two full-time jobs, how she thought about each transition between jobs, and her long-term goal for creating impact using her skills she's developed as a marketer. For myself, with a background in tech as a product manager and marketer, it seems we might sometimes fall into this narrow view of career development as staying in tech and moving up the career ladder. Sabel has found a way to use her marketing skills from tech and improve the lives of others, and has shown that tech isn't the only industry to use the particular set of skills that we have. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Sabel Harris. Sabel, it's good to get to chat with you again. We chatted about a week ago, and now we get to have about an hour and a half together. Sounds like you've had a crazy week. And I gotta ask, with the pandemic going on, and it seems to be getting better, it's been about a year now. You seem like you have a ton going on. What have you been doing to take care of your mental health and take care of yourself?
Yeah, well, it's definitely taken a toll. And actually, it was something I was talking about with my therapist this morning. So I feel really privileged and fortunate that I'm able to go to therapy and I do go to therapy. So I actually go to therapy at least once a week. Um, and sometimes it's twice a week. So I also do something kind of interesting that I think a lot of people don't know about or don't talk about, is that I go to group therapy, which means I meet with kind of the same individuals every week. And for me, it has been a really life-changing experience. It has helped me develop a lot of kind of interpersonal communication skills. And really, it's allowed me to kind of take a step back and think about my own emotions and how those are at play in my everyday life and how I work through certain emotions and conversations. So it has been very life changing. It has also been really life changing to do therapy during a pandemic. So everything is virtual. It's through a screen. I have to also be honest, it is not my favorite thing to do. I really enjoy meeting people in person, but something that it's helped me is to verbalize my emotions, to say how I'm feeling. And because we can't pick up those physical cues anymore. But that is one form of self-care. And I realize a lot of people may not have that opportunity. It may be really hard to access therapy, whether through insurance, it's too expensive. It is very expensive.
Yeah.
It's hard to find the right person. So I've also been just trying to be easy on myself. I read a tweet, it was this week, that someone was talking about they talked with their therapist and they were having a really hard time, and they felt that they were starting to experience depression again. And they were saying, I have to do all these chores. I have to rinse my dishes before I put them in the dishwasher. And the therapist said, there's no rules, especially now. Why don't you try running the dishwasher twice? So
Huh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to keep that in mind and go a little easy on myself and think of, the pandemic is not permanent. It may go on a little bit longer than we all want, but trying to think of those moments where, what, there's no precedent for this. Like, it doesn't need to be this harsh, like, perfection or critical standard. I can run the dishwasher twice, or I can indulge in something, or I can take a break, or that is not important and urgent right now. I can put that on the back burner just for a little bit. So those are kind of the things. And it's certainly, I think my self care is a work in progress every single day.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I recently started going to a therapist as well, and I also had a call this morning, which I'd say was one of the more challenging calls that I had. But for me personally, it took a bit of time, a couple years for me to actually decide to go to therapy. I'm wondering, what was your journey there? How did you come to decide that that was the path you want to take to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I started therapy when I was 14 years old. My parents and myself, we were all going through a divorce at the time. And it was involuntary. My mom essentially was like, this is pretty traumatic. You're going to go to therapy and you're going to kind of figure this out. And so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, I think a lot of 14-year-olds don't really know. We aren't taught mental health in schools. Um, so that was also life changing for me. And when I went off to college is when I stopped therapy. And I didn't pick up therapy again until about 3 years ago, when I had felt that I was burned out, that I, was struggling with communication with my loved ones. I didn't understand. I just felt like I was hitting a wall. And I knew it was going to be hard to find a therapist. And I just looked on kind of Psychology Today. I tried to find one that fit with my insurance plan. Didn't luck out on that front. But I would say the third therapist that reached back out to me that said, they were accepting patients, is the one I'm going to today. And it has been, again, just a lot of work. It's not easy. I think people think, oh, this is just a session where you vent and you talk about, things that are going on in your life, and that, you'll like feel better about it after, or, oh, they're just going to prescribe to you things. And it's not a venting session, because it's almost like when I do talk, I figure out kind of the homework that I need to do after, and the things that I have to continuously work on. And two, my therapist is not a psychiatrist and cannot prescribe medication. But it has been, I feel just like very fortunate, because I found a great therapist. And I feel, when I look back from 3 years ago when I started seeing my therapist, I then to today, I'm like, wow, I think if I was dealing with the pandemic right now and not going to therapy, it would be 10 times as hard.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate, and thanks a lot for sharing that background there. I'm glad that you decided to do that. I'm the type that tends to be in my head a lot, and having someone talk through a lot of these things and help me figure out the hard questions that I'm not asking is really
Mhm.
helpful. I think it actually falls really in line with this idea of the long term. If ideally, hopefully, we're on this world for a couple more decades, and if we're here for that long, we should be taking care of our mental health. Each day that we forget to do that kind of compounds over time, and especially during this time with the pandemic and everything. I also had some trouble finding a therapist. I
Yeah.
used BetterHelp. I'm not sure if you heard of that, but I've referred a couple folks to that. It's a little bit expensive, but helps with the matchmaking process of
Hmm.
not scrolling through Psychology Today for hours on end. So I'd love to tie that a little bit to kind of your career. I imagine therapy kind of benefits a lot of aspects of your life, and you seem quite career driven. You've had a career in marketing. You recently made a move into local politics. Can you tell us about that arc and how that made sense, and maybe how therapy has helped you with those different transitions?
Yeah, therapy. I did also start therapy when I was in the midst of a career kind of transition. Not so much I was transitioning from, marketing to, something else. It was more so on, you know, w- the type of company that I was working at, the kind of industry, and really trying to figure out, okay, do I want to work for technology startups kind of anymore. And so I started my career in marketing. I did not know I wanted to work in marketing. I feel like I just dove right in, stumbled into it, stumbled into the pool, and then somehow got right into the deep end with marketing. I started my career at a startup called Track Maven, and I was employee number 3 and was hired as a marketing manager, which really meant I was doing everything under the sun. That also included marketing because there were only 5 of us at the time,
You were employee number
um,
3. That's straight out of college. Am I correct?
straight out of college.
What did you study in
Uh,
college?
I studied history and economics, which there are some threads in marketing for that. But I originally also thought I wanted to go to law school, which is why I majored in history and econ. And then when I had some internships in social media, in just kind of in fashion writing, which is also a little different from what I'm doing today. I thought, oh, this might be an interesting mix for marketing because at that time, too, a lot of people were going to law school. Not very many people were getting jobs after they graduated law school. And I didn't want to take on more student loan debt than I already had.
Yeah.
Um, and the funny thing about the job market at the time too, it wasn't terrible, but it was certainly not at its best in 2012. And my mom at the time told me, she said, it's going to take you 6 months to find a job. And of course, me being the oldest and stubborn and set in my ways, I told her, no, I'm going to find a job before then. And she called it to the day. I think I graduated on May 22nd. And then I didn't get my job. I didn't sign or get my job offer until November 22nd. So when with the phrases like mom is always right, it certainly she was right in this instance.
Why
Very
why
right.
why did you feel like you would be able to move faster? Was that something that's just part of your personality to get it done quick, or were you just trying to prove it wrong?
Probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
My personality is very much like getting the job done. I, really enjoy, I think before, probably now it's a little different. I enjoyed moving very fast, learning a lot, which is how I found myself kind of in the startup sector. And, that's how I landed at Track Maven. It was through, I tried to interview at one startup, and then the person who I was interviewing with actually, and she's one of my best friends now, she recommended me to the CEO of Track Maven. His name is Alan Gannett. And then kind of the rest is history. And I jumped right in and worked there for almost 2 years, built the marketing from the ground up, but was feeling really burnt out after I did that. I think I learned a ton and got a lot of incredible experience. It's really where the foundation of my marketing career was built. I also had the fortunate opportunity to market to marketers. So it was a very meta
It's a very
learning
special
experience.
job. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
When I
is
was at
very,
HubSpot, we joked about that of we're marketers who are marketing to other marketers on how to use marketing software. So you
yes.
mentioned this personality trait of moving fast, getting it done, and looking through your bio, you've moved through many companies over the last couple of years. But you said your approach to things might have changed. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that has changed and kind of your approach now?
Yeah, I think in my 20s, I was very set on moving very fast. I still am very ambitious, and I think it's a great quality that I have. But I, was determined to move up the career kind of ladder. I, had a goal that I wanted to lead a team that, I really enjoyed kind of building that marketing, but I wanted to do it at a larger ish scale. So I think, I don't think it was a detriment to my career, but I think, as I have some more years under my belt and learning kind of what I want, where I do like to work, the things that I like to work on, I'm finding that I can slow down a bit, there's not a rush to get to, the CMO role. I would love that. Maybe, I don't know. My path is, I have a few different paths now, but I think, now I'm learning, after being at where I am now, EVERFI, for a little over a year. I think it's like a year and some change, maybe a year and a half, which is kind of crazy to think about. Um, I'm finding that I enjoy being at a little bit of a larger company that has a little bit more experience. There's certainly some pain points, but it's allowed me to slow down. It's allowed me to look at what do I love about marketing? What are certain industries or things that I think that I can draw some parallels to that I really enjoy as well. So that's where I've kind of found, okay, I've gone through these transitions. I've had the great startup experience where I've been employee number 3, or I've been employee like 16. And, I've had the experience of, climbing up to, director level or even senior director. And, now I found, I think the title is important, but it is what's underneath too, and how can I shape that to what I want now.
Yeah. You mentioned asking yourself what it is you enjoy about marketing. What do you enjoy about marketing?
I really love the people aspect. So, which is a little bit on kind of the sales side. So, I love hearing about, people, what drives them forward, what their headaches are, what, you know, um, they're finding really interesting about the product. And, I love being able to then convey that back through content, through the web, through social media, and really building out kind of that community. And there's different facets underneath of that with, paid ads and, how do we, try to convert these individuals. But it always goes back to kind of those relationships and that part of marketing with kind of those connections. And how do I do that kind of digitally through content or ads or what? So it's still on the generalist level, but I love that part. I am very much a people person. So that really gets me energized about marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of dots here to connect to where you're currently at. And I'm kind of setting us up to chat about your current jobs, plural. Earlier you mentioned you're trying to figure out if you want to stay in tech and do marketing in tech. What spurred that question, and how are you thinking about that now?
Yeah, I think it's one, it fills the side of I love working autonomously. I love um like working on cutting edge things. I do love the fast paced nature. I love also taking old things and making them into kind of new, or polishing them up and, figuring out kind of that problem. And I think, and I've worked traditionally on kind of the software as a service side. Um, I really like the space. I like just how fast it goes. But on the opposite side, it can be a pretty toxic culture. So I have oftentimes been the only woman in the room, especially early on. I distinctly remember going to some local investor event, and I wore a bright pink sweater, not on purpose. I just really like the color pink, and I stuck out like a sore thumb, and it felt a little alarming. And I didn't when I think my parents and my mom especially kind of was telling me that I would face these like barriers, or that I would this glass ceiling, and I was a little, I think, in denial. That I'm like, no, that's not going to exist. And I like crashed right into it. I didn't break through. It was like a bird flying into a window. Like, that's how I felt when I started in kind of this startup world. And it's certainly taken a toll on me a bit. I think where I'm at now, it's EVERFI is different. But being the only woman in the room, or being the only kind of minority in the room, it feels inferior, and it feels toxic, especially when there's other things at play. I don't know how many times I've been interrupted. I, don't know how many times I've been mansplained to. And it gets very taxing. And, I certainly know that on this other career side, it's everywhere. But in this sector where so many things are cutting edge, you kind of have a different level of expectations, hoping that this is a new kind of frontier, and yet we're still stuck in kind of the old boys club corporate room.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for touching on that. I know myself being a minority and having a lot of friends who are people of color, um, it's a common story that we've all shared, and I think we each cope with it a different way. I've been asked, like, do you feel like, as a Southeast Asian brown man, if you've been overlooked for some things? And the straight up answer is, I don't know. Like, maybe.
Yeah.
You can't really for sure say. It's People are going to deny it, but you're going to feel that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you started off in tech, you were there for many years, and it looks like you've moved out to a different space. What are you seeing in not the non-tech world now?
Yeah, I think, well, so I don't know if you're kind of referring, EVERFI is still kind of in the tech space, but I
Okay.
would say it's different in that, it's the biggest company I've ever worked at. So there are over 500 employees. I don't know everyone's name. Everyone doesn't know my name. We're all now in a pandemic. We're all working remotely in different areas, but there's a better support system. So I am a part of our professionals of color affinity group. So that has been very supportive, and that has been very helpful to me, where I don't feel lonely, where I don't feel like, I'm making this up, or I've, And I've developed a closer relationship to our SVP of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's been so helpful to me. And I genuinely feel that it's not just well-intentioned. I think a lot of individuals at EVERFI are really trying to make a positive impact. And EVERFI does straddle kind of the tech space too, because it's an education technology company. So there's components where it is the offline world, where we have a schools team reaching out to teachers, to school districts. And then we have our kind of other side where I'm at is we're trying to reach out to sponsors to sponsor critical education like mental health for these schools. So it's been a nice bridge, because the other side that I'm in now is in kind of the public sector with local politics. And that side, it's almost the tech world prepared me for this side, where some things that I'm finding and people are like, oh, like you'll get used to it. And I'm just thinking to myself, I've been there. This is not the first time for me.
Yeah. I think that's sort of a good segue then to start asking, tell us about how a background in marketing ended up in, well, you moving into some local politics, your experience there, and it seems like there's common threads between your work at EVERFI and your decision to move into local politics.
Yeah, so I've always loved politics.
You don't hear that often.
I've stayed in tune with it. I love kind of consuming the news, kind of trying to understand what's happening. And I never really knew how to make the transition. And I also knew at the same time too, if I go from working at this fast-paced startup and then I go work for kind of the DC government, I am going to experience extremely different worlds. Maybe not so much on the kind of interpersonal communication, but I'm going to experience a difference in the pace. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. And I didn't know at the time too, where, I would look at different job descriptions, or I'd see, a political agency or even a lobbying firm have different, roles that I could potentially fill. And I didn't understand, how do I translate my marketing tech experience over to this role when they're looking for someone who has worked in government affairs or has worked in kind of public policy. So I didn't know, and I kind of stumbled into this new role. About 2 years ago, I had met our current, so the role that I'm in, I was elected to be our neighborhood's advisory neighborhood commissioner. And I can give a background on what all of that means.
Yeah, that'd be
with
great.
that. Okay. So in DC, we have 8 different wards. So we're unfortunately not a state. This is my plug. Anyone listening, please contact your local representative and let them know that you would like DC to become a state. That's my plug. I'll end it right there. But DC is broken down into 8 wards. And then each ward is broken down into what's called an advisory neighborhood commission. So I live in Ward 1, and Ward 1 has, I believe, 4 advisory neighborhood commissions. Now, each of those commissions are then broken down into single member districts. So each single member district represents around 2,000 to 3,000 people. And then a advisory neighborhood commissioner, which is kind of the representative, is elected to represent those 2,000 to 3,000 people. So
that's hyper local.
It's hyper local. So I am advisory neighborhood commissioner for single member district 1B12. So our commission is actually one of the largest in DC. So typically each commission has around 6 or 7 commissioners. Ours has 12. So it's
Okay.
fairly large. I also represent a very active, diverse part of DC. So I represent is the 14th and U neighborhood. It was formerly called, and I hope one day we can reinstate the name, Black Broadway. It's filled with a ton of jazz history, a ton of also history of, different protests. But it's a amazing area. There's a ton happening. And I do represent probably around 3,000 people, and that might change. Probably the next term, we might be affected by the redistricting that is happening from the census. But for now, I still represent a good chunk of people, and it is awesome so far. I'm in also I was sworn in on January 2nd. So I have officially been in office for about a month and 3 days.
How does that feel to say out loud?
Um, I don't know. It feels good. It feels like it's been longer with everything that is happening in my district. So, and last night I was just elected to be the co-chair of our Zoning Preservation and Development Committee, which handles a lot of private residential kind of zoning things, whether that's permits or what. But it feels like it's been a long time, but it hasn't. So, I mean, in my neighborhood, we have, a kind of mid-sized development happening that's going to require a lot of work, and that's right across the street. Then we have a huge development happening that's also right across the street. It's the Reeves Center, which is a big kind of municipal building in DC, but it's very underutilized right now. There are plans for the NAACP to relocate their headquarters there. But yeah, that will be huge, and that will take a lot of time. And then I have our kind of energy or our gas company called Pepco. They are working on a huge project in my district called our Capital Grid project, which affects all of DC. And then, of course, I have, other issues that come up, whether it's trash, dumpster fires, it's also the pandemic. I have a large senior apartment building in my district, and I'm currently trying to make sure that they know when they can sign up to get the vaccine and to get those appointments. So there is a lot going on, and so that's why I feel like it hasn't really been a month. It's been a lot longer, which is
Yeah.
probably very close to how I felt working at a startup.
Right. And those are all things you're not going to just get it done over a single day or a week. It's going to take months or maybe even years, it sounds like, for some of those projects to come to fruition. And the story I'm kind of seeing is you were in marketing, it seems like you kind of wanted to move into politics, but wasn't sure how, like in an official salaried manner. And here you found another pathway, which maybe in a long term, you might want to do something more involved in politics. So it sounds like you're thinking about this in terms of the long term instead of just what you're doing now. And the question that comes up for me is, what are the parallels you're seeing between marketing and politics? I feel like as marketers, we tend to think, oh, I can just do marketing for this company. But it sounds like you're able to apply that to a completely different industry.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was going a little bit before I broke down kind of advisory neighborhood commissions. I always forget that it's not, when I say it, one, I don't ever want to bore someone, but two, people are like, what? I have no idea what that is.
I'm one of those people.
It's hyper local, and I believe it's hyper local to DC. But when 2 years ago I had met our current kind of advisory neighborhood commissioner. His name is Dan Winston. I think he's great, and we started talking, and I didn't know at the time that this like role existed. I always had kind of frustrations of, who do I talk to? Who do I call? Like, I don't understand, like, who represents me. It feels like no one represents me because DC isn't a state. So I had met him outside our local farmers market, and he was telling me about kind of what he wanted to do as commissioner. And he also told me about his background. So and he still
Wait,
is.
were you at the farmer's market and just bumped into this person, or was there like an event where you were there to meet?
No, so he was standing, and I'm also thinking of the rules of the farmers market. They're very strict. They don't allow anyone to campaign in the farmers market. So this was outside, and we were just walking home after we bought some things, and Dan was outside campaigning, letting people know that he was running for this. And he was telling me about his background, and because I asked him to, because even though he was running uncontested, or unopposed, I still wanted to know. I wanted to kind of make him earn my vote a little bit. So I just kind of asked about his background, and he told me he was working at Spin, the kind of bike and scooter company. And he told me a little bit about the prior companies he worked at, which were more kind of in the tech startup scene, which then really piqued my interest. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. He is able to like translate this over. And, the other thing that I should note for advisory neighborhood commissioners, so I still work at EVERFI, but as a commissioner, it's unpaid. So it's public service in its truest form. So I do kind of have two full-time jobs, but one is it's voluntary. It's on a voluntary basis. But so after talking with him, I thought, great. Like, I think, he would be a good representative. I can't really vote for anyone else. Like, let me vote for Dan. And, let me earmark this. Maybe this is something that I could get involved with later on. So fast forward to June of 2020. I was thinking to myself, because, I saw construction happening across the street. I knew about kind of the Reed Center redevelopment. And I thought, wait, I've gotten a couple of Dan's newsletters, but is this role coming up to be like elected again? Like, is he running again? Let me dive in and see what's going on. And I found out that he wasn't running again.
So you
I
had some
thought,
ideas, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm maybe I'm going to try this out. And I, looked over the process, looked over, what I needed to do. And I would say, so there is a formal process, you have to pull like petition papers. I had to get signatures for people to get on the ballot. And I think the limit this year, you had to get, I think 10, and I did get 24 because I wanted to be that overachiever, but also wanted to make sure that like there was no disputes on if these were signatures from people in my district and that they were registered to vote. And then the other thing at the time, so what I wanted to mention about A and C races, they typically go uncontested. So, you usually have one person running, or you sometimes have no one running, and then someone needs to step in and say, okay, I'm running as a write-in candidate. And I very much thought, I'm like, this is how it's going to go. Dan's not running again, and I'm going to be the only one running. Cool. Like, I'm still going to try to, reach out to people, try to connect with people, let them know that I'm going to be their commissioner. I was probably completely just like a little delusional thinking that, no one else was going to run, because when a neighbor that I saw in the park one day asked me if I knew of anyone else running, I said, no one else is running. And I jinxed myself, because I looked online that day and I saw that 3 other people had pulled petition papers to run. So I was looking at a very competitive race, not only just in my district, but across DC, because like I said, these races go uncontested.
So at this point, I'm wondering, what does Sabel the marketer decide to do?
Well, Sabel, the ultra competitive marketer, was very much like, okay, I'm not backing down, making sure that I get over 10 signatures to make sure there's no disputes, because people can protest to make sure and to validate that your signatures are right. I started to do some competitive intelligence, tried to look up my opponents. And then I said, okay, what can I do? What do I need to do with my brand? And this was one of my gripes about politics kind of in general, is when I look at a lot of these emails, when I look at websites, they're stuck in kind of the early 2000s. And I'm like, why? Like, we live in 2021. We can have like great websites, we can have great user experiences, we can have great brands, and it can look nice, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. Granted, there's absolutely some privilege that I have in being able to do that, but I decided, okay, person of color to design my logo, and I want them to be in DC. So I want it to be a local kind of graphic designer. I was put in touch with someone when I posted on LinkedIn. Here's another marketing thing. I posted asking for any referrals on LinkedIn. And I connected with a local student from that goes to school here in DC, and he designed my logo, and he gave me a brand book on the colors that I should use, the fonts that I should use. This is very much, I'm like thinking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is very, a marketer clearly was on this campaign. Yeah. But it was just important to me to have those elements, because one, I knew being in a pandemic, I couldn't, go knocking on doors. So I knew that there would be a huge element of people coming to my website. I wanted to make it easy to read. I wanted to make it eye-catching too, because I knew my race was competitive. So I was thinking, how do I stand out? And then how do I kind of build, that community? How do I, have great kind of materials, and, people see, I had, my campaign poster with my face on it. Although I did make my fiance and I made a bet of when will someone draw something on my face? But no one actually did that. So that was nice. But it just, I was very thankful to have my marketing kind of expertise, especially on kind of the brand marketing side, to have kind of those aspects. And I truly think it helped kind of carry me over the top. Then, we can get into the campaign aspect of, even, I think that probably touched on my like marketing and sales, maybe my demand gen side when I campaigned.
Well, I think what might be interesting, you mentioned this the last time we talked, was how a lot of the skills you've developed as a marketer actually applies when you're in office, of like learning about what your audience is interested in. All that. Can you talk a little bit more about how those skills have translated over while you're in office?
Yeah, and I think, when I think about our current commission, and I even think about the people who were running, none of them were marketers or are marketers. So I'm kind of an outlier in this, and I had, at the farmers market, the same farmers market, when I decided to
Comes full
campaign, I
circle.
ran. Yeah, it does. It always does. When I was out campaigning, I had met someone who was actually running for council member. Um, Completely different role. And I met the person who was running, and then I met kind of one of their supporters, and they asked me, "Oh, so are you an attorney, or like are you a teacher? Like do you work in education?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I work in education, but I'm a marketer." And he just looked stumped. He didn't know what to say. All he said was, "Wow, that's a really interesting transition. I've never met a marketer."
Like, are you an
Which,
influencer or something?
yeah. Like, are you trying to sell me something now? Like, so which kind of got me a little irritated, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, there are tie-ins to this, but it helped get me thinking exactly about, oh wait, at first glance you don't see those connection points. But then when you start thinking of, back to, what I said about, building those connections and building that community and understanding kind of my audience, that's exactly kind of what politics is. So I needed to go and look at, okay, let me look at my neighborhood. Where do they hang out? This is me probably like doing persona research. Like, where do they hang out? Like, are they on Twitter? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Like, how do I reach them? How do I reach them during a pandemic? Like, do I send them direct mail, which I did not do? Well, I take that back. But I really tried to figure that out, to figure out, okay, how do I make those connection points? Are there any community leaders that I need to reach out to? How do I try to get to know, an influencer in the deal, which one of the influencers, or there were two, so I got two endorsements, and that was me trying to figure out this, I guess, influencer or buying center. And, our current commissioner at the time, Dan, he did endorse me. And then there's a local publication called Greater Washington, which they send out a questionnaire for candidates who are running for ANC to fill out. And then they endorse from that questionnaire, which I was endorsed by Greater Washington. So that was awesome. But then, I looked at other ways of like, who could my potential constituents be? How do I get to know them? And so, as I mentioned, there's a large senior apartment building in my district, and which means there's a lot of people who are at high risk of, getting COVID. And so I couldn't go in there. I couldn't, go knock on doors. I couldn't, try to, meet with them. So I thought, okay, they're not on Twitter. They're not on LinkedIn. Maybe they might be on Facebook, but, I'm not going to be able to serve them ads at such like a hyper local rate. So what can I do? Oh, I have access to a whole voter registration kind of list of people who are registered to vote in my district. What's the address of that building? Let me filter this list. And I am going to handwrite cards to all of them.
Wow.
So I ended up handwriting about 250 cards. And I would like to point out that I did not use the same message for all of them, and I did handwrite them.
Impressive. You didn't use one of the online services like Handwritten or Postable or something to type them out?
No, I mean, that's the other thing is that so I did accept donations from kind of friends and family, but people can only donate up to $25. And I didn't want to kind of rely on that. Which so running for office is really expensive, and it's not easy, and it's very much the case of you have to be in a certain position to be able to run. And you can certainly get donations and things, and I mean, this is probably a completely separate topic about kind of campaigns and campaign finance, but I just, the big part of my campaign was I wanted to connect with people in my community. I wanted to get to know them and show that I cared. So it was important to me to handwrite these cards one by one. I would sit where I'm sitting right now, and I had my postcards over here, and the local print shop that I used actually put all of the addresses on there for me, which was nice, because I'm like, ooh, yeah, that'll probably be easier if they do that. And I still have some stamps left over. I bought a bunch of stamps, and I mailed them out. And I don't know if everybody got the cards, the postcards, but I did get a few people email me saying that they got the card because my website was on it. I tried to put my email address. I also put, this was very much me as a marketer. I had my call to action, and I told them exactly what to do. I said, I am third on the ballot. Make sure you turn your mail-in ballot over because I'm in the back and I'm third on the list. Vote for me.
That's amazing. So the thing I'm wondering now is most of this conversation has been about what it's been like being in an office. We've barely gotten to touch on your actual day job at EVERFI.
Yes.
And you're essentially working 2 full-time jobs. What's the mission you're working toward? I'm kind of seeing some common threads in the things that you seem to care about and want to accomplish, but curious to hear from you. What's driving you? What's that mission you're working toward?
Yeah. So before I started at EVERFI, I was at another kind of career transition point. I had just finished up working at an agency, kind of figured out too that I don't know if agency world is what I want to do. I like, having that brand loyalty of this is who I work for. And I interviewed at several different places. I interviewed at a university for a marketing role, which would be very different from the other fast-paced jobs. I interviewed at another startup where I would have been, I think, employee number 5. And then I got recruited on LinkedIn by EVERFI, and I had known about EVERFI through working kind of in DC tech. And once I started kind of interviewing there, I really got attached to the vision and mission. And EVERFI is an education technology company where we provide education on critical skills and really fill that missing layer in education. And we can go into that more. And, when I saw that they were connecting companies who are experts in this space to schools, it got me so excited, and it still gets me so excited every day because I think back to my own education where, I wasn't taught, financial literacy. I wasn't taught, anything on mental health. I wasn't taught anything on kind of sustainability or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think I would have been a much more well-rounded person if I had these things. But, it gets me excited for, I have a little sister who is 12 years old that, she has the potential to take these courses. And when I saw that, I'm like, this is great. This is what I want to be a part of. I feel the sense of purpose. I am here to make an impact. I'm still working in marketing, still have to generate leads, but I'm behind this mission. And it's not to say that the companies that I was at before didn't have that, but it was hard, you know. I was marketing to marketers. It was nice. It was great. Or I was marketing to like YouTube creators, and that was fun. But there wasn't that, you know, like overall societal impact that I was looking for. And, you know, working this other full-time job as commissioner, it has that same purpose. You know, it gets me really excited every day to like wake up and, you know, the DC government uses Outlook, and I hate Microsoft Outlook.
Oh no.
It's terrible. But I get excited to check my Outlook email. And granted, I have gotten some emails where I'm dealing with, you know, graffiti on walls, or I'm dealing with trash. And, you know, this morning I did get an email about, you know, some trash trucks being too loud. And the constituent went out and measured the noise decibel levels, like really tried to like work through the process. But that makes me feel like, okay, I can help. I can, you know, it's very hyper local. It's dealing with trash a lot. It's dealing with 311, but at least I have this like purpose. I'm here to represent my neighborhood. I'm here to represent my constituents and to, you know, provide something better. And, you know, the other big component, you know, and I didn't get to work on this, and I really admire the former commissioners who did get to work on this. But so right in our commission, and about 4 or 5 blocks up from me, there's this new building. It's short-term family housing for families, and then also more permanent housing for senior women. And the building is beautiful. When you walk by it, you think it's a luxury condo building. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, great. Another luxury condo building. Like, we don't need that because people need affordable housing. And then finding out that it's a short-term family housing like building, and that it's providing just a home to people who don't have that right now, it makes me feel so energized. It makes me feel like, wow,
about that.
I can help with this. I can help with, you know, making sure that new developments have a component of affordable housing. I can make sure that the Reeves Center redevelopment doesn't just sit there now, and that it has a purpose and it has a place where people can go to. And so that makes me really excited, even though my day-to-day is filled with trash complaints. I have that purpose of I can impact my neighborhood. I can, you know, help change the things that need to be changed.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying is, because you're able to think about the long-term impact that you can have, the day-to-day, you know, dealing with trash and all of that, that's fine. Like you can work through that and solve those things, but it's the bigger challenges and problems that you're trying to solve in the long term. And
exactly.
I appreciate there's someone like you thinking about those things. I imagine, so you're at EVERFI as a director of demand gen, and you're a commissioner, 2 jobs that seem like there's quite a lot of responsibility, things to think about, decisions to make. How do you make time to think and do some deep work and think through some of these candidly big challenges?
It is still a work in progress. I haven't figured it out, because this is probably one of the first times in my life where I have so much going on. I will say too, the other thing that I've, not because I don't want to, the other thing that I've been, I guess, procrastinating on, is I'm engaged. You know, I will have to plan
Add another thing
soon.
into the world. Yeah.
But And I'm very excited about that. I think
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm sure my fiance is smirking at it, but I am excited to, get married. But I don't know. I don't know how I, make time. I think, right now, I'm going to have that's on my to-do list because like I mentioned, there's so many big projects coming up. And I almost need like a strategy session of, I need to sit down, I need to think about this. But I think, I don't know, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited. I'm like, you know what? I need to take a step back and I need to do that. And what I need to do. I think what helps me is when I sit down, I close my computer and I get out my notebook. I have a separate notebook for EVERFI, and I have a separate notebook for my ANC work. And, one, writing out everything that kind of needs to be done. And then thinking through, okay, how do I work through this? And then the exciting part, which I love, is who do I get to talk to about this? Sometimes I jump ahead a little bit, which now talking through it, I jumped ahead because there's a huge project coming up and I'm like, let me text my neighbor and I'm going to reach out and we're going to get coffee and we're going to talk about this. And I'm thinking, I'm like, it's not just him that's going to be impacted. I probably need to talk with others and I need to take a step back. I think that's ultimately what I do to be more mindful is, okay, Sabel, pause, take a step back.
Yeah, I think it'll be comforting for a lot of folks listening to this that someone with so much on your plate doesn't exactly have everything figured out. I think that's something a lot of us learn as we go through our careers is no one really has anything figured out. We're all figuring it out together. So thanks for being vulnerable with that.
Yeah. And it makes life easier when you just admit that you don't have it figured out. When you say, I don't know. And yeah, I think the thing that I figured out is that I don't have it figured out.
And that's okay. We're all in it together.
That is okay. Yes.
So I had a couple questions, just fast-paced questions to close out this call if you're up for it.
Sure.
So first one, these are just questions we like to ask guests on a show is, if you could have dinner with one person dead, one person alive, who would they be?
One person, maybe. So this is a hard question because I think the one person dead I would want to just talk to and have dinner with and to I'm tearing up is my grandfather. I am the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family. The age gap between my cousins is pretty big. I think the second oldest, grandchild is a cousin on my dad's side, who is, 24, like trying to figure out the age. And so that's about 7 years or so. And, the reason why I'd want to have dinner with him is because I want him to be proud of me and I want to kind of give an update and a lot of, when I think back to, my childhood with him, and he passed away when I was 16 from colon cancer. And I, he told me some things that definitely made me upset. He's like, you should go and you should go into the military so then you don't have to pay for school. And, thinking back on it now, I think he was just trying to look out for me because also I'm thinking of my student loans and I'm like, oh gosh, probably should have done that. But I want to give him an update. And he was into politics. He was even though my dad's side of the family, they, live in Waynesboro, Virginia, which is Western Virginia. He was bright blue Democrat. And even though as commissioner, I am, it's nonpartisan. I am a Democrat, but I just would want to update him and tell him about, my life and where I'm at and, how he's influenced me and, give him a chance to be proud of me, which I know he is, but, just would want him to see where I'm at now.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet he would be very proud of you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that. We can talk about that some more if you'd want, but I appreciate you being open to sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. I think just it goes back into kind of my culture, and I'm Vietnamese, and it's been instilled in me at a very young age to kind of respect like your elders, and I've talked about this probably in therapy of how some of those traits can be a little toxic, not respecting elders, but trying to please and have someone be proud of you. I think can be toxic, but I think is also just a part of who I am. But I think he would be proud. And, I do envision him, looking down and, being happy for me. But the one person alive, I would love, I probably wouldn't be able to talk. Is I would love to, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because I would love to have dinner with President Obama and Michelle Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama. I think I would just probably stare at them and just burst into tears, happy tears. My mom's partner works for the Secret Service, and he was able to get us into an event that President Obama was speaking at. And we were kind of in the front row, and we knew because they stay not
You were
staged,
in the front row?
Yes, we were in the front row.
You were breathing the same air as him.
I was breathing the same air. And we knew that he would come around and we could shake his hand. And I was ready. I was so ready. And when he came around, I was also thinking, I'm like, what do I say? Like, do I have time to say anything? And I knew I wouldn't have pretty much any time. And I went in, I shook his hand, and I just had a smile on my face, probably the biggest smile, and then just tears running down my eyes. Just I didn't say anything because I was so overjoyed to meet him and, to meet just this amazing leader. And, there were, in politics, and just overall, there's, things I'm sure in his, presidency that people disagree with, that, there's a lot of, and there's things that I've disagreed with. I think though, just meeting him as a, seeing a multiracial person in office, and just from his leadership, his ideas, and also me as a marketer, I'm like, you ran the first digital political campaign, your work was amazing, your team did such an incredible job. And I just would love to talk with them both about kind of their careers, their background. I just want to be their friend. I just want to be, I guess, that creepy friend just staring at them smiling. That's what dinner would be. They'd be like, all right, this is awkward. Thank you. And then leave.
Yeah. It's funny, as whenever I ask these sort of questions, I ask myself the same question in my head. I'm like, I wonder how I would answer this. And I had those two folks in my head as well. And now they're I mean, their career's been amazing. They're now creating Netflix specials and publishing books. I mean, what can't they do?
Yeah. I mean, there's several politicians who I would still love. Like, I would love to have dinner with Hillary Clinton. I would love to have dinner with Vice President Harris, not to be mixed up with my last name. One of my colleagues told me that because you should have the campaign slogan, "Why vote for one Harris when you can vote for two?" I'm like, that's great. I should have that as my campaign slogan. And then I would love to have dinner with AOC. I mean, I think we would be friends.
I think you're one step closer now to doing that.
I know. I think we could be friends. I'm thinking, if I were to run for something else, maybe her and I would be friends one day.
So your mission is actually just to become besties with AOC.
Yeah, exactly. That's my new campaign, I guess, promise is I will become best friends with AOC. Oh no, I might eat those words one day, but.
And so my next question is, it might be a similar answer to what you just shared, but who do you admire professionally and why?
Yeah. I think I always think about this because there are marketing influencers that, I read every day that I admire, and, I look at their careers of, okay, is that a path that I potentially want to follow? But I think, right now for me, who I do really admire kind of professionally is AOC. I look at her background. She didn't have a background in politics, and I as well do not have a background in politics. And she, I really admire that she talks about her background as a bartender and shows how she has clear experience in working with people, talking with people, getting to know people. She has said, she's like, I'm very proud of my experience as a bartender because it has given me communication skills, being able to relate to people, being able to pick up and listen to what is going on. And I really admire that. I admire, her confidence to be like, this is who I am, this is my background, and, take it or leave it. And this is what I was elected on. And she's, I think that is incredible. And I think that says a lot about a person. And I appreciate how she's not ashamed of it. And she has no reason to be. And so I'm like, you know what? I have that too. I was not a bartender, but I'm a marketer. I understand how to build audiences. I understand how to reach out to audiences. And, this is a big facet of being a politician. So that's who I admire professionally right now. And, she's a marketer too. She knows social media. I believe she just gave a kind of workshop with other Democrats in the House on how to use social media. So
no way. Wow.
She did. I'll if I find the article or if I find the tweet, it's probably in a tweet, I'll send it to you. But she did. I'm like, oh, yeah. She's a marketer.
Times are changing where they're talking about how to use Twitter, specifically for politics. Just last night, my grandma was like, we have a smart TV and she was asking me how to open up YouTube. I was like, how do you know the word YouTube? She's like this old Cambodian lady. I'm like, wow, times are changing, huh? That's really cool. I can understand why you respect her, and her story is incredible, how she's gotten to where she is.
It is. It really is. And no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you cannot, she has won just in such a short time because she was just elected in 2018. So it's not she's had decades of this under her belt, but she commands the attention. She stands her ground. She has, great policies. She's not ashamed of her background and her beliefs. And I think that is so powerful. Even if, you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, it is incredibly powerful.
And you mentioned earlier, there's these marketers and influencers you follow and all that, and you wonder if that's a career path. But in general, whether it's for marketing or getting better at your job or getting better in office, what blogs or podcasts or people are you following right now to learn from?
Yeah, well, my Twitter account it has changed a little bit more to the local side. So there's this little it's like joke, but it's not really a joke. It's like ANC Twitter, which there are all these commissioners, and it can be kind of like an echo chamber because I'm like, what constituent is following this? This is like we're just all talking with each other. So right now, like on the influencer side, it's certainly some commissioners who I think are just doing an incredible job and doing, the work and reaching out to people and, making, the hard decisions. Like, the only benefit that commissioners get is we do get a city official parking pass. And it's a perk. You can park anywhere. And you can't park in front of a fire hydrant. You can't, there's other kind of some limitations to it, but you can park in, metered zones and not have to pay the meter. You can park in other places. And, there have been some city officials, including commissioners, who have taken advantage of it and had some bad behavior with it. But there has been a group of commissioners who have come out and said, don't send me my parking pass. Like, we are giving up our parking passes as a sign of protest to show that DC is not equitable when it comes to transportation. So when we look at, our fellow neighbors who live in wards 7 and 8, they don't have access to the metro. Buses, aren't as frequent as they are in, the other wards. Ubers and Lyfts are also not as, accessible there, or it's too expensive. And, I did sign that letter. We actually did just get a car, and, I make the joke that, our ANC Twitter might skewer me over it because there's a lot of commissioners who are against cars. We got it for personal reasons. And, but I really admire kind of those influencer commissioners who kind of have led the charge on that. So I'm following them. In terms of like blogs and podcasts, this is probably one of my like guilty pleasures. I follow I follow a lot of marketers on LinkedIn. You've got what's his name? Dave Gerhardt, that, my colleagues love. And I started following him because all of the marketers at EVERFI liked his content. So it would be automatically shown to me. One of my former colleagues, her name's Katie Mitchell. She has grown her LinkedIn following like overnight. Not overnight. It's been like over several months, but she went from, I think like 1,000 connections to she probably has like over 30,000 now. So I do follow kind of what she says, and I just generally on the marketing side like to just talk with my peers and follow my peers on, what they're doing and kind of what they're saying and what they're talking about. But my guilty pleasure on like the blog and podcast side is kind of like I listen to a podcast all the time called The Sporkful, which is a food podcast. It's great. It doesn't, it fills more of my self-care side instead of like my actual like marketing side. And then I do love like after working for a company, like marketing to YouTube creators, I love like there's a big pool of YouTube creators that I like follow and watch. There's this one man who I do consider a friend. His name is well, his YouTube creator name is Belief in Fatherhood. He does an incredible job at producing his own music. The editing work, the animation that he creates is phenomenal, and he does it all himself. He does, I think, have some help here and there. But when you look at these YouTube creators, they're their own kind of production movie studio as like one person. And I think really highly of these creators because I've seen how hard kind of the work is. But and then there's others. There's this one 19-year-old that I follow, and I know that her videos come out on Fridays and Sundays. So I'm like really excited for the weekend. Her name's Mia Maples. I also saw she went from like I think like 400,000 subscribers to over, 1 million to now like almost close to 4 million. And this journey of just, their content that they're creating, and then kind of they find like this like viral moment, and then they like their growth explodes. And, she was reviewing Wish products. I've never bought anything from Wish, but here I am just Wish? Like engrossed. So wish.com is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's all of these just like sometimes random products, and they can be anywhere from like free and you just have to pay shipping to like thousands of dollars. You just go on like Wish, I think it's wish.com, and then it's hard to describe. It's like Amazon, but worse.
Okay.
Like there's no quality control on some of these products.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look after this.
But yeah, that's what I'm following, and that's kind of like that's my indulgence are these YouTube creators, these influencers. That's like it's just fun for me to consume it, and then to also almost be like this like self human anthropologist of like looking at their growth path and like what they're doing marketing wise. And I don't have any, in my head I'm like, oh, they could like tag this video, or like they could do this or that, and what do I know? I'm not a creator. But I enjoy it. It's definitely something, if you were to ask me again what my self-care is, that's another side of it.
Yeah, I love it. And, I think usually when folks think of podcasts, it's like, oh, listening to NPR or TED Talks or The Daily and all of that. And I
do listen to NPR every morning. So we tell, our Amazon like Echo, and I'm trying to like say it softly so it doesn't like pick up, to play, NPR. And, I do those normal things. I do not normal, but like, I'm not that highbrow. Like I absolutely kind of indulge on these like YouTube things. And, I've watched TikTok videos, but I will not be performing in my own TikTok. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay to say you have these indulgences, and I think people who don't talk about that are not living life to the fullest.
Yeah. For me, my form of self-care was to stop listening to NPR, The Indicator, The Daily, because when all of this pandemic stuff hit, that's all they were talking about. I'm like, I'm living this already. I don't need to hear the stats every single day about these things. And I just started watching more Netflix shows. I just watched Narcos Mexico, and it's about drugs, but I'm like here as a marketer and business person, like, wow, these are fascinating businesses. Like, how they get these deals? And like watching Mr. Robot and stuff,
it's definitely, that's probably better quality than like I watch. Like, I definitely indulge in like Bravo shows, and I look up, and I do. And me as this anthropologist or even marketer, I'm like, ooh, let me go look at their Instagram. Like, how many followers do they have? Like, what? Like, who are you? You're not the judge of this. Like, you have no followers. Like, why are you trying to judge them? Yeah. So I think, I love it, and it's my form of, okay, I'm going to decompress. I know I can, watch Emily in Paris or Real Housewives of Dallas or Real Housewives of Potomac. And, sometimes it gets a little intense, but other times I'm like, oh, okay, like, cool. I can break away from the news.
I'm happy to hear that between your 2 full-time jobs, you make time to indulge yourself and take care of yourself. I'm glad.
I'm thinking right now when I just was talking about Bravo, I'm like, ooh, I have a show to watch. I didn't watch Real Housewives of Dallas this week, so I get to watch that after this.
Yeah. Well, I know it's getting late where you are. And one last question is where can listeners find you on the internet?
Sure. Well, as a marketer, you can find me anywhere. I'm on Twitter, so it's just my name at Sabel Harris. Or LinkedIn, which is also Sabel Harris. I'm hoping one day someone will let me have at Sabel. That day might not be here, but I do have a close tie now to my last name, Harris. So on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, all of my accounts are at Sabel Harris.
Well, Sabel, it was great getting to hear about what you're working on, what you're passionate about. It's really clear that you care a lot about the folks that you're serving, and they're very lucky to have someone like you working for them. Thanks for making time to chat, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Thank you.